Hey everyone, my name is Josh Nelson. I'm a park ranger here at Fort Raleigh National Historic Site on Roanoke Island in eastern North Carolina. Fort Raleigh is one of over 400 national park sites all across our country that protect incredible scenic places, but also they protect the stories of our nation, basically our history. And that's what Fort Raleigh is about here. This is the story of the first English settlement. This is in 1580s. It's over 430 years ago. But it's the greater story of the first contact between the English people who are arriving here and the Algonquian speaking tribes that had been here for over 800 years prior. Often when people visit Fort Raleigh, they've maybe heard of the Lost Colony. It's a group of English settlers that in 1587 were dropped off on this island. There was about 115. And after their governor set sail for more supplies and more people back in England, he's the last European to have contact with them. They move somewhere, something happens to them. To this day, there is no consensus from experts on this story on where they go or what happens to them. There's lots of theories that are talked about. But even that, there's more to the story. There was a prior expedition 2 years before. I like to call it really the first colony that was on Roanoke Island. The English set up this attempt in 1585. It's primarily soldiers. There's 107 men. Ralph Lane is their governor, but among the soldiers, they also bring with them scientists and a metallurgist, basically somebody whose job is to try to find metals that the English might be able to export. Think in the 1580s. England is a small country, they're not particularly powerful, and they're overshadowed by Spain, which you could say is the superpower, at least in Europe, if not the world at that time. Christopher Columbus in 1492 had sailed under the flag of Spain, had bumped into land in the Caribbean, and the Spanish had conquered vast lands. They were exporting goods with treasure galleon fleets back to Europe, and it was really increasing their power, increasing their wealth. And the English, they see this, and they want to try to find some of this for themselves in what they describe as the New World, or North America. And so they send this expedition out, and the scientist's job is to learn what is here. What can we export home? You have Thomas Harriot. He's doing work here, distilling plants, trying to find plants that would be valuable as medicine and other things. You have Joachim Gans, who is a metallurgist from Prague, and his job is to try to find copper, gold, silver, iron, really any metals that would be able to be exported. Where I'm standing right now, and where this archaeology dig is ongoing, this is the location of their workshop. We call it the Science Workshop. And previous digs have occurred here in the past. So I think before we jump too far into what's going on today and things that we have been finding with this current dig, I think we should walk just a short distance back to our visitor center. There's a small museum there, and inside we have a number of the artifacts that previous archaeology digs have uncovered that'll help tell the story for you. Okay, so we've moved inside the visitor center here at Fort Raleigh, and there's a small museum that's located inside that has a number of the artifacts on display from previous archaeology digs. And in front of us right now, we're standing next to the case that is showcasing a few of the items found at the Science Workshop location, the site where the archaeology dig is ongoing currently. And this workshop, it's not the first time that archaeologists have gone into that area and have found artifacts. Basically, so far, we could tell you the type of work that was going on there. We could tell you who was even doing that work, but we couldn't tell you what was the scale of the actual shop. What did it look like on the outside? And those are all questions that are hopefully going to be answered a little bit more through further digs, including the one we're working on now. These different artifacts, they've been found in digs both in the late 1940s. At that time, something was known to exist there, but there was no explanation on what exactly it was. In the 1990s, early 1990s, there was another archaeology dig that finally started to piece together the puzzle on what was the work that was happening. And they realized that this is the Science Workshop. This is where the distilling was going on of different plants. And this is where the metallurgy work was going on as the English try to find metals to export back home. This case here on the upper left-hand side, there's two red clay tiles. And these would typically be a roofing tile, except here on Roanoke, the colonists were not building homes that were elaborate enough to have roofing tiles on them. So the belief is that these were actually used in the metallurgy process
And they were just used as a hard surface that was resistant to hot metals. That could withstand that and not burn. So we believe that's what the context we're finding them in. Upper right-hand side, there's a piece of charcoal, dark black. And the reason we'd find charcoal here is wood alone would not burn hot enough to be able to melt ore. And so you have to create this charcoal. Evidence in the area where the workshop was located, there's evidence that the English were also creating charcoal. They had a charcoal basically manufacturing place. And so we found a pit of that here. Below the charcoal, there are two lumps of iron ore. And this is what's being smelted. This is what's being melted down basically to try to learn if there's metal inside and what the ratio of metal is. Below that, there's a small piece of antimony. Antimony was something that was required to basically separate silver from the ore that it was in. And it was something that would have been brought from England over here to be able to work on this process. The lower left-hand side, there's two pieces of pottery. The lower one is a crucible. And think of this as a piece of pottery that can withstand high heat. And it would have been used in the metallurgy process. And then just above that, a pallet, also, again, a small dish that could have been used in the metallurgy process. It would have withstood high heat. And these are all items that likely Joachim Gans, the metallurgist, was working with over 430 years ago, back in 1585, as he spends those 11 months on Roanoke Island searching for the metals. I often do get asked, did he find very many? And really the answer is no. There are no precious metals found in the area of Roanoke Island. The English were being told by the Algonquian tribes that there was metals farther inland, and so they were hopeful, but they did not find very much. And what they did find was chunks of ore that had been traded from farther inland from the Algonquian people. So what we're looking at now is a fun piece, but also it helps really tie this story together for us. There's 4 bricks that are in this case, and these are bricks that appear to have been made here on Roanoke Island. And if you're able to look down from the top, you'll actually notice that they are rounded off, and this is really an opening to a furnace. So this is part of the furnace that the Joachim Gans would have been using in his metallurgy experiments, and Thomas Harriot would have been using in his experiments as he distills plants. You'll also notice in this case there's an artist's concept of what the science workshop may have looked like. And I want to emphasize the word may have looked, because at this time there really is no clear picture on how big this building was or what it looked like from the outside, or for that matter from the inside. It's an educated guess based on what has been found. We can tell you the different types of work going on there, and so there's likelihood that this is what it appeared like, but we don't know for sure. The thing too that's important to remember is that this is the group that is 2 years before the Lost Colony. And this is a military colony. They have some scientists with them. This group, they fail, as does the Lost Colony 2 years later. They fail for different reasons. There's a known conclusion to this story. This group sails back home with Sir Francis Drake. Drake has stopped here on his way home from raiding the Spanish in the Caribbean. And this colony, because they were short of food, because they had started conflict with the Roanoke tribe, which was the local tribe in the area, an Algonquian-speaking people, they decide this isn't working and we need to get out of here. And so they actually abandon the place after 11 months. The Lost Colony shows up a couple of years later. They use the same houses that had been left behind by the 1585 colony. They rebuild them. The goal is that they're going to spend a short time on Roanoke before moving to a more permanent location. Ultimately, the voyages to Roanoke Island, you can say they all do fail in the perspective of the English, because they are not able to create a foothold, a permanent settlement here. But they're learning a lot of valuable information. Think of it this way: when the English arrive here, they don't have an idea what the coast looks like. They have a blank map. And by the time they've left 6 years later, between 1584 and 1590 are really the voyages that we're speaking of, they have a detailed map that was painted of this area And so they have a lot more knowledge. They have knowledge on what the Algonquian tribes prefer to trade. The Algonquian people really prized copper in particular. And so this was utilized later on with settlements like Jamestown, which is about 20 years later, and Jamestown being that first English settlement that takes hold and grows and is more of a lasting presence. They learned that Chesapeake Bay is a better location. In fact, that's where they go for Jamestown, is off of the Chesapeake Bay. They learned that the sound waters around us are too shallow, and they had a better option farther north. So there was indirect successes, I think, from these Roanoke voyages, even though England was not able to really make it work on this island.
We're back out at the archaeology dig now, and I'm standing here with Eric Dietz, member of the First Colony Foundation. Eric, would you be able to just tell us a little bit about yourself and the group that you're with here?
Sure. As you said, my name's Eric Dietz. I'm a research associate with the First Colony Foundation. The First Colony Foundation is a nonprofit organization of scholars who've gotten together to research sites associated with the Elizabethan era in America, English sites with the Elizabethan era in America. And that pretty much narrows it down to Walter Raleigh and his endeavors to settle the New World. Now, of course, he never came here, but his settlement here at Fort Raleigh and any of the sites that may have been associated with him that are, off island in other parts of the region.
Would you be able to tell us a little bit about the process that you go through to start an archaeology dig like this, and what are some of the steps that it takes to really get here on site and start working?
Well, first of all, being that this is a national historic site, and any public that goes for state or anything else, you need to have what's called an ARPA permit. It's the Archeological Resource Protection Act, and that means that you have to have a permit to do any kind of digging on public lands, looking for any sort of archaeological resources. So that is a process that you have to prove. You have to have a research design. You need to have your resumes all submitted because they want to make sure they know what you're doing. And then so you come up with a research design, which we did, and we presented it to the park, and it got reviewed, and they decided that it would be a good cooperative project with the park and with the First Colony Foundation. So with the permits in hand, we come out and we start digging. If this was a site that had never been worked on before, we would establish a grid, set in a datum point, which would be a fixed point that we could measure everything that we find to a fixed point so we know where it came from. In this particular case, there have been archaeology going on out here for literally 100 years, and we have spent some time reestablishing the grid that was out here before because we want to, as much as possible, use the grid that was previously used so that it's all on the same sort of apples and apples sort of thing. So we reestablished our baseline, laid out our grid units, and then started excavating. First thing, and given the fact that this is not a site that has been farmed extensively, there are some disturbances from different years of different phases of being different kinds of parks, but we don't know what's going on under the soil when we start. So we dig very slowly and very deliberately, very horizontal swipes, shovel skimming and troweling, dig very slow, layer by layer, and find out what artifacts are in each layer and try to make sense of how that relates to the history of the site.
Could you tell me a little bit about some of the misconceptions that people might have about archaeology in your experiences?
One of the main questions I get all the time, and I've done a lot of public archaeology, is how did it get underground? Why is everything underground? Is dirt piling up from all over the place? So some people sort of think that it should be right on the surface because why is it underground? But other people always have this picture of Egyptian archaeology where you're 20 feet under the ground with pickaxes and things. It's hard for people to get their brain around the idea that the entire history of human occupation of Roanoke Island is probably encapsulated in about 12 or 14 inches of soil. So that's one of the big questions. They want to know, how deep do we have to dig to get to 1585? And we could tell them that 1585 could be right at the surface.
And now you're talking not just the English time here, but entire human occupation of Roanoke
going back
down
to I don't recall off the top of my head how far back the Native American presence here goes, but I know it's thousands of years.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, thanks. Yeah. What has been found here on site so far, and could you talk a little bit about how that helps to paint a picture for us of these different voyages the English are taking here in the 1580s?
Sure. Now, there's two aspects of what we want to find in archaeology. artifacts and features. Now, a feature is a non-portable artifact. Like, we're looking for post holes, fence lines. You can't take a hole into the lab. I mean, it was made by humans just as much as a pot or a bottle, but it's a feature in the soil. Artifacts are nice because they help us date the features. So we are looking for primarily, in these 2 units that we've opened up, we're primarily looking for the extension of different fence lines and ditches that we have seen from previous archaeology. When J.C. Harrington was out here in the 40s and 50s, and then he did some more work in the 60s, he mapped a tremendous number of fence lines, post holes, but it's a little bit like the ancient Greeks looking into the stars and saying, well, these 5 stars make a crab. I mean, there's a lot of things that don't relate to this time period, the 1580s. So we've been looking at the ditches and sort of looking at them with a fresh eye towards what sort of defensive features might have been associated with the fence lines and things that we have out here. And a couple of those ditches and trenches are coming up in these directions, new unexcavated areas where we could see a fresh look at some of these ditches or slot trenches or something like that would give us maybe some more information. It's a puzzle. It's an old sort of cliche, but it is a puzzle piece by piece, and these are 2 more pieces in the puzzle. It's almost like there should be an old game show on TV called Concentration, where you'd have those things and you'd have to flip it back and forth and you'd have to remember what was there. I mean, luckily we have a map of what was there, but it is filling in these little blocks of areas to find more features in the soil that would make more sense. And of course, along the way, we definitely want to find artifacts that would help us understand what was going on here. There's been a lot of archaeology in this area, and unlike domestic sites where you would find the refuse of animal bones from their meals or food preparation or storage vessels, almost all the artifacts found, in fact all the artifacts found here at this site, have been scientific in nature. They've been crucibles, these other little dishes used for metalworking, these French stoneware jugs that would have been used for distilling. So you have Harriet, who is the plant guy, and the natural materials guy, and then you have Joaquin Gans, who's the metal guy. They have the scientific instruments, and they also have the vessels that they need to carry out their assessments. They're try to figure out what would be exploitable resources from this site or from this area to take back to England.
And I think that's a great point. So you're basically saying that this is a work site that has been found. This isn't where these people were living.
That's correct.
That's unknown, correct?
Yeah, we do not know where the main palisaded village was that White returns to and finds abandoned. It's not unlikely that this would have been set separately. You don't want to bring Jamestown in it too much, but Jamestown is one of those sites that's a good parallel. It's only a few years later. It's only 18 or whatever the math is. At Jamestown, the glass house where they were doing industrial work was a mile away. They put it a mile away
From the houses?
Yeah. Okay. You don't want to burn everybody up if you're burning fires or the noxious fumes or anything like that. Yeah. For whatever reason, it was a mile away and separated from the main settlement. So we have lanes, what we think is lanes for it. We have the outwork here that was, some of the soil stains look like palisade fences to some sort of other structures that were associated with the science workshop. It's not unlikely that, well, at least from the archaeological evidence, we have no evidence of anybody this being a domestic site in any way. So,
and that's still an unknown.
Right.
Yeah. Still a lot more work to do out here.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of work done here, but there's still more that's not known clearly.
And it's one of the great things about the partnership between the National Park Service and the First Colony Foundation is this ability to continually learn more about the site. Park Service, we don't have the expertise in archaeology, but we're able to share the story with the nation and really the world when people visit from all over the place. And First Colony Foundation, they're able to come here on site, conduct some of this work and share their findings with us, so we can tell you more when you visit.
And the other important thing is the stewardship. This site is protected by the Park Service. We're only digging 2 units. We all have regular jobs. This is our side deal here, which we're very interested in. It drives our interests. But this site will be here in 2 years if it takes us 2 years to get back here. It's not going to be built. There's not going to be a grocery store or a highway here. So much of archaeology is done in the front of progress and construction. But we have the ability here to take the slow approach, really be methodical, and take it one piece at a time, because we know the site is protected. It's, you know, it's not going anywhere. It's being taken care of, and so there's no real rush. As much as we'd like to find out everything right now, we don't have to figure out everything by Friday.
Right. And really, I mean, you're hitting on one of the values of this National Historic Site is that collectively we all are protecting it, that it is here in the future, that we can learn more about it in the future.
Yeah, this site has been on people's radar. I mean, there's references from the 1700s and 1800s of people coming out here and observing the site where Sir Walter Raleigh planted people here. And so it's been an important site, and it's been, since the 1940s, it's been a National Historic Site. So it's been cared for, and it's not, like I said, it's not going anywhere. It's not a threatened site, like so many situations in archaeology where you have to do it fast and get it done before bulldozers come in.
That won't happen.
No.
Quick question before we wrap up. Just what is it about archaeology that really draws you into it? Why have you chosen to do this over the course of your life?
Well, that's a, a multi-layered question. I grew up as an archaeologist. My father was an archaeologist.
Okay.
But besides that, I could have, not all my siblings are archaeologists. I have a great interest in early English colonial sites. So if you're going to be working on early English colonial sites, let's see, which one is the jewel in the crown? Fort Raleigh, because it's the earliest one. And I've worked on a bunch of early English sites up and down Virginia, Massachusetts, and down here. So if you have an interest in early English colonial properties and sites, and then this is as good as it gets. It's frustrating at times because we don't find a lot of stuff. There weren't a lot of people here for a very long time, but that's not really the issue at the end of the day. It's just being able to be here and dig and have a connection to such an important site.
Great. Well, hey, we appreciate your work out here. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
You bet. Anytime.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. Thanks.